My husband looked me in the eye, called the dinner I spent hours cooking pig slop, and threw the entire hot plate right into my face. But that humiliation was nothing compared to the truth I discovered when I found the pills hidden in his cigar box. For months, I have been living in a fog in our Greenwich estate, believing I was developing early onset dementia because everything I ate tasted like rotting meat. I sat there, shaking, apologizing to Arthur for being a burden, while he and his so-called legal assistant, Chloe, were actually feeding me heavy sedatives to incapacitate me. I was so desperate to be a good wife that I thanked him for the poison he called vitamins. I let him convince our friends and neighbors that I was crazy, all while he was finalizing the paperwork to commit me to a facility and steal my $5 million trust fund. How do you breathe when you realize the person you have slept beside for 15 years is not just cheating on you, but is actively trying to erase your existence? I have the camera footage now. I saw what they did in my kitchen while I lay drugged upstairs, and I feel like my soul is bleeding out on the floor. I have the evidence to ruin him, but I am terrified of what he might do if he finds out I know the truth. Please, I need someone to tell me. Saoyitsing Haling, 2 hash is greater than should I run away with nothing to save my life, or stay and fight for what is mine. My name is Ivy Sinclair. I am 42 years old, though if you asked my husband, he would likely tell you I look 50. I am a housewife, a title I wear with a heavy, suffocating kind of pride, living in a sprawling colonial estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, to the outside world. Specifically, the members of the Greenwich Historical Society and the envious mothers at the private school drop-off line. Back when we still entertained the idea of children, I am the woman who has it all. I am the sole heiress to the Kensington textile fortune, a trust fund baby who traded a corner office for an apron. But standing here in my kitchen, clutching the edge of the cold marble island until my knuckles turn white, I do not feel like an heiress. I feel like a ghost haunting my own life. It was 4 in the afternoon, and the light was already dying outside. The weatherman on the local radio station had been warning us all day about a historic northeaster barreling up the coast. They said the roads would be impassable by midnight. The sky outside the French windows was a bruised purple, heavy with the promise of snow that would bury us alive. I liked the snow. It covered the imperfections of the world, much like the layer of foundation I applied every morning to hide the shadows under my eyes. My stomach gave a low, painful growl. I ignored it. I was 18 hours into my intermittent fasting window. My husband, Arthur, had mentioned last week that my waistline was looking a little thick around the edges, a comment delivered with a smile, so polite it felt like a paper cut. So, I stopped eating breakfast. Then, I stopped eating lunch. Now, I existed mostly on lemon water and the desperate hope that if I shrank enough, he might look at me with desire again. I turned back to the stove, despite my hunger, or perhaps because of it. I was preparing a feast. I had driven into town specifically to get the ingredients before the storm hit, since the fish market at the harbor had closed early due to the weather warnings. I had to settle for the premium counter at Whole Foods. It was fresh Atlantic cod, thick white fillets that I was now searing in grass-fed butter and thyme. Beside it, on a baking sheet, sat baby Yukon Gold potatoes, roasted until their skins were perfectly blistered and seasoned with rosemary and sea salt. The smell was intoxicating. It smelled like home. It smelled like the lie I was trying so desperately to believe. Inner monologue. Look at you, Ivy, cooking a Michelin star meal for a man who has not touched you in 6 months. You are pathetic. You are starving yourself for a man whose business is failing. A man who is only living in this house because your father's money paid for the mortgage. But you will smile. You will serve him, because if you stop, if you admit the truth, everything shatters. The sound of the garage door rumbling open sent a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. It was the same reaction I used to get when I was a child and heard my father's belt unbuckle. Arthur was home. I quickly checked my reflection in the darkened oven glass. I smoothed down my silk blouse and forced a smile onto my face. I needed to be perfect. If I was perfect, he could not be angry. That was the logic I lived by. Arthur walked into the kitchen, bringing a gust of freezing air with him. He was a handsome man, 45 years old, with the kind of jawline that aged well and eyes that could charm a snake out of a basket. But tonight, his shoulders were tight. His briefcase hit the floor with a heavy thud. "Welcome home, darling," I said, my voice pitched slightly higher than normal. "I beat the storm. I made your favorite pan-seared cod and roasted potatoes." Arthur did not look at me. He walked straight to the liquor cabinet and poured himself 3 fingers of scotch. He downed half of it before turning his gaze my way. His eyes were bloodshot. The failed deal with the investors in New York must have gone poorly. I knew I should have stayed quiet, but the silence terrified me more than his temper. "It is ready to serve," I said, reaching for a warm plate. I made sure the skin was crispy, just how you like it. He sat at the head of the table. I placed the plate before him, arranging the fish and potatoes with the precision of a food stylist. I stood back, hands clasped in front of me, waiting. I felt like a servant waiting for the master's approval. Arthur picked up his fork. He stabbed a piece of the cod, inspecting it as if looking for a flaw. He brought it to his mouth and chewed. Once, twice, the room went dead silent. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes. But inside, the air was stagnant. Then, he stopped chewing. He slowly pulled a napkin from his collar and spit the food into it. "What is this?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "It is cod, Arthur, with lemon, butter, and thyme." I stammered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "No," he said, standing up slowly. "This is not cod. This tastes like Halin. 2 hash is greater than death." He looked at the potatoes. He poked one with his finger, crushing it. "And these? Do you call these potatoes? They are dry. They reek of Halin. 2 hash is greater than chemicals." "Arthur, I bought them fresh today. I washed them myself. Maybe your palate is off because of the scotch." "My palate?" he roared, his voice cracking like a whip. Suddenly, his hand moved in a blur. He grabbed the edge of the porcelain plate and hurled it. The plate smashed against the wall behind me. Inches from my head, pieces of fish and buttery potatoes exploded outward, splattering onto my silk blues, my hair, and the pristine white cabinetry. The crash echoed through the large kitchen, followed by the wet sound of food sliding down the wall to the floor. "You are feeding me pig slop," Arthur screamed, his face contorted into a mask of disgust. "Is this a joke to you? Do you think because I had a bad day you can feed me garbage? Or are you trying to poison me?" "No, Arthur, please," I cried out, instinctively raising my hands to protect my face. "I would never." "Then eat it," he hissed. He pointed a shaking finger at the mess on the floor. "If it is so good, Ivy, you eat it. Prove to me you are not trying to kill me to get your hands on my life insurance. Get down there and eat it. I looked at the floor. The beautiful white fish was now covered in dust and shards of broken porcelain. Arthur, I cannot. Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than there is glass. Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than I whispered. He stepped closer, towering over me. I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath, mixed with the metallic scent of his rage. You are useless. Ivy, you cannot work. You cannot provide children. You cannot even cook a simple meal without ruining it. My mother was right about you. You are just a spoiled little girl playing house. He turned on his heel and stormed out of the kitchen. Clean this mess up, he yelled from the hallway, and do not bother coming upstairs. I cannot stand the sight of you. I stood there, trembling. As the tears finally spilled over, I looked down at the ruined meal, the food I had cooked, while my own stomach screamed for nourishment. Inner monologue. Pick it up, Ivy. Pick it up before it stains the grout. That is what you are good at, is it not? Cleaning up messes, hiding the cracks. He is right. You are useless. If you had just seasoned it better, if you had gone to the fish market earlier, none of this would have happened. It is your fault. It is always your fault. Slowly, painfully, I sank to my knees on the cold tile floor. I reached out to pick up a piece of potato, my hand shaking uncontrollably. Outside, the snow began to fall harder, burying the world in white, locking me inside this beautiful, terrifying prison. The morning sun hit the snow-covered lawn with a blinding brilliance that felt almost mocking. I had spent the night on the fainting couch in the sunroom, wrapped in a cashmere throw, staring at the ceiling until the shadows turned into gray light. My neck was stiff, but the physical discomfort was a welcome distraction from the hollow ache in my chest. I had cleaned the kitchen until 3 in the morning. I had scrubbed the grout with a toothbrush until my fingers were raw, ensuring not a single speck of cod or potato remained to remind us of the night before. I walked into the kitchen, expecting the heavy silence of a battlefield after the fighting has stopped. Instead, I found the aroma of freshly brewed Colombian coffee and the sight of 24 long-stemmed red roses sitting in a crystal vase on the island. Arthur stood by the espresso machine. He was dressed in his navy blue suit, the one he wore for board meetings, looking crisp and put together. He turned when he heard my footsteps. His face was not twisted in rage anymore. It was softened by an expression of deep, pained regret. Ivy, he said, his voice dropping to a low, tender register. He crossed the room in 2 long strides and pulled me into his arms. I stiffened instinctively, my body remembering the violence of the plate shattering against the wall. But he held me tighter. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply. I am so sorry, he whispered against my skin. I do not know what came over me last night. The stress with the investors. Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than the looming bankruptcy. Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than it is eating me alive. I took it out on you, and that was unforgivable. Can you forgive a foolish, desperate man? I stood there, my hands hanging limply at my sides. I wanted to push him away. I wanted to scream that stress does not give him the right to treat me like a dog. But the warmth of his body was so familiar, so seductive. It was the drug I had been addicted to for 15 years. It is okay, Arthur. I lead, my voice barely a whisper. I know you are under a lot of pressure. Inner monologue. You are a coward. Ivy, a spineless coward. He buys you flowers with money from your own trust fund, and you melt like butter. You let him erase the abuse because you are too terrified to be alone in this big, empty house. You are not forgiving him because you love him. You are forgiving him because fighting him takes energy you simply do not have. For the next 3 days, it felt like a second honeymoon. Arthur was attentive. He complimented my dress. He touched my hand across the dinner table. But beneath the surface, the air was thin, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. I walked on eggshells, terrified that one wrong step would shatter the illusion. The crack happened on a Tuesday. I had prepared a simple beef bourguignon. I had simmered the beef in red wine for 4 hours until it was falling apart. Checking the seasoning obsessively, I tasted it 5 times. It was perfect, rich, savory, and balanced. We sat down to eat. Arthur took a bite. He chewed slowly, his eyes fixed on me. Then the grimace returned. It was subtle this time, a slight curling of the upper lip, but it hit me like a physical blow. "What is it?" I asked, my grip tightening on my fork. He put his fork down and reached for his water glass, drinking deeply as if to wash away a foul taste. "It is nothing," he said, but his tone said everything. "Tell me, Arthur, it is just Sa유ting Haolin. 2 hash is greater than very salty. Ivy, incredibly salty. It tastes like you dropped the entire canister of sea salt into the pot." I stared at him. I scooped a spoonful of the sauce into my mouth. It was not salty. If anything, it was slightly under-seasoned because I knew he was watching his sodium intake. "It is not salty," I said, my voice trembling. I tasted it. "It is perfect, Arthur Sihil." A sound of weary patience. He reached across the table and took my hand. His skin was cool and dry. "Ivy, darling, we have talked about this. You have been complaining about headaches lately, and now this. The fish the other night tasted like rot to me, but you insisted it was fresh. Now this beef is inedible, and you think it is perfect. I am worried about you." "Worried about me?" I pulled my hand away. "There is nothing wrong with me, is there?" Arthur asked softly. He looked at me with a pity that was far worse than his anger. "I found your keys in the refrigerator yesterday. You left the garage door open all night last week, and now your sense of taste is completely distorted." I felt a cold prickle of fear at the base of my spine. I did not remember putting my keys in the refrigerator. Had I done that? I had been feeling foggy lately, tired and disoriented. Maybe he was right. Maybe the stress of our marriage was breaking my mind. The next morning, Arthur drove me to a medical center in Stamford. He said he had called in a favor with an old friend from the club to get me an emergency appointment. Dr. Helen was a woman in her late 50s with steel gray hair cut into a severe bob and rimless glasses that magnified her icy blue eyes. Her office was sterile, smelling of antiseptic and expensive leather. She did not smile when we entered. Arthur sat beside me, holding my hand tightly, playing the role of the concerned, doting husband to perfection. "So, Ivy," Dr. Helen said, looking at a file on her desk, "Arthur tells me you have been experiencing some Sa유ting Haolin. 2 dièse est supérieur à épisode. Memory lapses, distorted sensory perception, mood swings. I felt like a child being scolded by a principal. Sa유ting Haolin. 2 hash is greater than I suppose so." I stammered. "I have been tired." Dr. Helen nodded gravely. She ran me through a series of tests. She asked me to remember a list of 5 words. Apple, penny, table, garden, watch. 5 minutes later, when she asked me to repeat them, my mind went blank. I could only remember apple and table. The other words had vanished into a white fog. I saw Arthur exchange a look with Dr. Helen, a look of shared understanding. Ivy, Dr. Helen said, leaning forward. Based on these initial cognitive tests and the behavioral history Arthur has provided, I am concerned. We are seeing early markers of cognitive decline. It is rare at your age, 42, but not unheard of. It could be early onset dementia, exacerbated by stress. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Dementia. No, I whispered. That is impossible. I am just tired. I am just hungry. Dr. Helen ignored my protest. She turned to Arthur. We need to monitor her closely. Arthur, she should not be driving, and she certainly should not be managing complex tasks like finances or cooking with gas stoves. It could be dangerous for her. And for you, Arthur nodded, his face a mask of tragic acceptance. I will do whatever it takes. Helen, she is my wife. I will take care of everything. We left the office in silence. As we walked to the car, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. The trees, the cars, the sky, everything looked distorted, like a reflection in a funhouse mirror. Inner monologue. Dementia? Am I going mad? Is that why the food tastes fine to me but terrible to him? Is that why I cannot remember where I put my keys? My mother died in a hospital bed, not knowing her own name. Is that my fate? To wither away in that big house, drooling on myself while Arthur watches with that look of pity? No, I cannot rely on my own mind anymore. I have to trust him. He is the only one who sees reality. I am broken. Arthur opened the car door for me. As I slid into the leather seat, he leaned in and kissed my forehead. Do not worry, Ivy, he whispered. I am here. I will handle the house, the money, everything. You just rest. I looked at him, tears blurring my vision, and for a moment, I felt grateful. I did not see the shark-like glint in his eyes. I only saw a lifeline, and I grabbed it with both hands, unaware that I was pulling myself closer to the drowning pool. The house was silent, a vast and echoing silence that felt less like peace and more like a held breath. Arthur had left for the city early that morning, claiming he had back-to-back meetings with potential investors to save the company. He had looked handsome in his charcoal suit, the very picture of a titan of industry, though I noticed the fraying threads on his cuffs that he thought I was too blind to see. Before he left, he had placed 2 pills on the kitchen counter and watched me swallow them with a glass of water. They were my vitamins. He said, supplements to help my brain function. To stop the rot, I wandered through the empty rooms of the estate like a visitor in a museum. The diagnosis from Dr. Helen hung over me like a shroud. Early onset dementia. The words felt heavy and foreign in my mouth. I was 42 years old. I could recite the lineage of the British monarchy and calculate the compound interest on my trust fund in my head. Yet I was being told I could not remember to turn off a stove. I found myself standing in front of the double oak doors of Arthur's home office. He had made this room strictly off-limits 2 years ago. He claimed he handled sensitive client data and could not risk me moving papers around while cleaning. It was a reasonable request, or so I had told myself. But today, a strange rebellion stirred in my gut. It was not a loud roar, but a quiet, nagging whisper. If I was losing my mind, if I was becoming a burden, then what did rules matter anymore? And besides, The cleaning lady had called in sick. Someone had to empty the trash. I turned the brass knob. It was locked. Of course it was locked. I went to the laundry room and retrieved the master key from the hidden hook behind the detergent cabinet. My hand trembled as I slid the old skeleton key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. The air inside the office was stale. It smelled of old paper, cedar wood, and the lingering scent of Arthur's expensive cigars. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn, casting the room in a perpetual twilight. I walked to the massive mahogany desk, feeling like an intruder in my own home. Papers were stacked in chaotic piles. Unopened envelopes from creditors were shoved hastily under a leather blotter. I saw a foreclosure notice from the bank peeking out from beneath a stack of sports magazines. Inner monologue. Look at this. Ivy, the great businessman. He tells you the company is just going through a rough patch. Yet he is drowning in debt. He is lying about the money. If he is lying about the money, what else is he lying about? No. Stop it. You are the one who is sick. You are the one who forgets things. Do not project your failure onto him. I picked up the heavy brass wastebasket to empty it, but as I did, my elbow knocked against a small, wooden box on the corner of the desk. It was his humidor, where he kept his prized Cubans. The box slid and hit the floor with a clatter, spilling its contents onto the Persian rug. I gasped, dropping to my knees to gather them before he came home. Cigars were scattered everywhere, but among the brown tobacco leaves, something shiny caught the light. It was a silver blister pack of pills. I frowned. Arthur did not take medication. He prided himself on his perfect health, claiming his vitality was due to his superior genetics. I picked up the packet. 2 pills were missing. The foil backing was punched through. There was no box, no prescription label, no orange bottle with his name on it, just the silver strip with a code stamped in black ink on the back. Erexno. Cero. No, I held it up to the dim light. These were not the large, chalky vitamins he gave me every morning. These were small, pale blue tablets. Why would he hide pills in his cigar box? Curiosity, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog in my brain. I stood up, clutching the foil strip, and hurried out of the office. I locked the door behind me, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I went to the library, where I kept my iPad. My hands were shaking so badly I mistyped the code twice. Finally, I entered the letters and numbers into the search bar. RX 909 pill identification. The search wheel spun for what felt like an eternity. Then, a list of medical websites appeared. I clicked on the first link. Drug name, Zopiclone derivative. Generic, class, sedative hypnotic. Common uses, treatment of severe insomnia. Side effects, drowsiness, dizziness, memory loss, hallucinations, and severe dysgeusia, metallic or bitter taste in the mouth. I froze. I read the words again. Severe dysgeusia, metallic or bitter taste in the mouth. I scrolled down to the user forums. People were complaining about the drug. User named Sleepless in Seattle wrote, "This stuff knocks you out, but everything I eat the next day tastes like pennies and rotting meat." I had to stop taking it. User named Night Owl 88 wrote, "Be careful with the dosage. My doctor said it can cause amnesia. I would wake up and not remember cooking or driving." The iPad slipped from my fingers and landed on the plush cushion of the armchair. The world did not spin. It stopped. It stopped dead. The fog in my brain did not clear gently. It was ripped away by a violent wind. The fish, the potatoes, the beef. The way Arthur claimed they tasted fine while I gagged on the taste of rot. The taste was not in the food. It was in my mouth. It was a side effect. And the memory loss. The keys in the refrigerator. The garage door. The stove. My mind raced back to every single night for the past 3 months. Every evening, around 8 o'clock, Arthur would make me a cup of herbal tea. He would bring it to me with a smile, saying it would help me relax. Chamomile with a touch of honey, he would say. I always thought it tasted slightly bitter, but I drank it because he made it for me, because I wanted to be a good wife. He was drugging me. He was not just gaslighting me with words. He was chemically altering my reality. Inner monologue. He is doing this. He is actually doing this. He is poisoning you. Those nights you felt so heavy, so sluggish, as if you were moving through underwater currents. howling, 2 hashes greater than. That was not fatigue. That was him. He waited until you were drugged. Then he moved your keys. He turned the stove back on after you went to bed. He created the chaos. And then he watched you cry and apologize for it. He sat across from you at dinner, watching you choke on food he knew tasted like poison, and he laughed inside. He brought you to Dr. Helen and held your hand while she called you crazy. A sound escaped my throat. A low, guttural keen of pure animal betrayal. I clamped my hand over my mouth. I could not scream. If I screamed, I would shatter. And I needed to be solid. I needed to be stone. I looked at the clock on the mantelpiece. It was 3 in the afternoon. Arthur would not be home until 6. I had 3 hours. I needed proof. The pill packet was evidence. Yes, but he could talk his way out of it. He would say they were for his sleeping problems. He would say I stole them. He would say I was paranoid. The word of a woman diagnosed with early onset dementia meant nothing against the word of a respected businessman. I needed to see him do it. I ran up the stairs to the guest bedroom closet, buried deep in a box of old gift wrappings. There was a small device I had bought 6 months ago for my niece's baby shower, but had forgotten to mail. It was a high-definition nanny cam, disguised as a USB wall charger. It looked completely innocuous. Just a small white plastic cube that plugged into an outlet. I tore the packaging open with my teeth. My fingernails were broken, but I did not care. I downloaded the app to my phone. I connected the device to the Wi-Fi. I ran back down to the kitchen. Where to put it? It had to be somewhere he would not look, but somewhere that captured the entire room. The kitchen island, the stove, the place where he made the tea. There was an outlet on the backsplash, right next to the coffee maker, and the spice rack. It was cluttered enough that a simple charger would go unnoticed. I plugged it in. The tiny blue light blinked once, then went dark, just as the manual promised. I pulled out my phone. The live feed appeared on the screen. It was crisp and clear. I could see the marble island, the gleaming copper pots, and the tea kettle sitting innocently on the burner. The invasion began on a Thursday. Under the guise of benevolence, I was in the kitchen, staring at the coffee maker, trying to act as though I had forgotten how to operate it. It was a performance I had been refining for 48 hours. My hands fluttered uselessly over the buttons. My brow furrowed in exaggerated confusion. I could feel the camera lens burning into my back from the backsplash. A silent witness to my deception. Arthur walked in, but he was not alone. Behind him stood a woman who looked like she had walked straight out of a catalog for high-end athleisure wear. She was young, perhaps 25, with hair the color of spun gold and skin that had clearly never known the stress of a failing marriage. She wore a tight beige sweater and leggings that left nothing to the imagination. "Ivy," Arthur said, his voice dripping with that sickeningly patient tone he had adopted recently. "I want you to meet Chloe." The woman stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply on my tile floor. She extended a manicured hand. "Hi, Mrs. Sinclair," Chloe said. Her voice was bright, chirpy, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Arthur has told me so much about you." I looked at her hand, then at Arthur. "Who is she?" I asked, making my voice tremble slightly. "She is your new personal assistant, Ivy," Arthur explained, placing a hand on my shoulder. "With your Sao Yu Tsing Hao Lin, deux dièse et supérieur à condition. Sao Yu Tsing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than getting worse. I cannot leave you alone in the house all day. It is not safe. Chloe is going to help with the cooking, the cleaning, and keeping you company." Inner monologue. "Help? You mean replace? She is not here to cook, Arthur. She is here to mark her territory. I see the way she looks at you. I see the way her eyes dart around my kitchen, calculating the value of my copper pots, my crystal, my life. You brought your mistress into our home and called her a nurse. I do not need a babysitter, Arthur," I whispered, looking down at my feet. "It is not up for discussion," he said firmly. "It is for your own good." From that moment on, the house was no longer mine. Chloe moved through the rooms with an air of entitlement that made my blood boil. She reorganized the pantry, claiming my system was illogical. She threw out my organic spices, replacing them with generic brands, because, as she put it, "It is not like you can taste the difference anyway." Right? The first time we were alone, the mask slipped. Arthur had gone upstairs to change. I was sitting at the island, watching Chloe chop vegetables for dinner. She was using my favorite Japanese chef's knife, handling it with a carelessness that made me wince. "You know," she said, not looking up from the cutting board, "you are lucky Arthur is such a saint. Most men would have put you in a home by now." I gripped the edge of the counter. "He loves me," I said, playing the part of the delusional wife. Chloe snorted. She stopped chopping and looked at me. Her eyes were hard, flat surfaces. "He pities you, Ivy. There is a difference. He tells me you wander around at night talking to yourself. It must be sad, losing your mind while you are still so young. But do not worry. I am here now. I will take care of. Sao Yu Jing Haoling, 2# is greater than everything." She smiled, and it was the smile of a predator looking at wounded prey. Inner monologue. "You have no idea. You little leech. You think I am the prey? Keep talking. Every word you say, every smirk you give me when he is not looking, it is all fuel. I am memorizing your face. I am memorizing your voice. Enjoy my kitchen while you can." The isolation spread beyond the walls of the house. That afternoon, I walked down the long driveway to check the mail. It was the only time of day I could breathe fresh air without the scent of Arthur's cologne or Chloe's cloying perfume. A black Range Rover slowed down as it passed the gate. It was Linda Gable, the president of our homeowners association. Linda and I had served on the charity gala committee together for 5 years. We had shared wine, secrets, and complaints about our husbands. I raised my hand to wave, a reflex of social conditioning. Linda looked at me. She did not wave back. Instead, she offered a tight, pitying grimace, a look reserved for roadside accidents and sick animals, and sped up As she drove away, I saw her pick up her phone, likely to report to the other neighbors that she had seen poor Ivy wandering near the road. Arthur had done his work well. He had poisoned the well of my reputation. To them, I was no longer Ivy Sinclair, the respected heiress and community leader. I was the crazy woman in the big house, a liability, a tragedy waiting to happen. I walked back inside, clutching a handful of bills I was no longer allowed to pay. Dinner that night was a torment. Chloe cooked a risotto that smelled heavily of garlic and truffle oil. I sat there, picking at the rice, while Arthur and Chloe discussed business. She was supposedly his legal assistant as well, though it was clear her expertise lay elsewhere. "Eat up, Ivy," Arthur commanded. "You are getting thin." "I cannot," I said softly. "It tastes Sauting-Halling. Zwei Raute ist größer als Metallic." Arthur slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "Damn it. Ivy," Chloe slaved over this meal. "Stop with the theatrics." "I am sorry," I whimpered, shrinking back. "I am trying." After dinner came the nightly ritual, the final act of my daily performance. We stood in the kitchen. Arthur opened the cabinet where he now kept the medication, the Zopiclone he was passing off as vitamins, and other pills I had yet to identify. He shook 2 blue tablets into his palm. "Open up," he said. I opened my mouth like an obedient child. He placed the pills on my tongue. He watched me intently, his eyes searching for any sign of resistance. I reached for the glass of water. As I drank, I used my tongue to slide the pills into the pocket of my cheek, a trick I had read about in a spy novel years ago. I swallowed the water with a loud gulp. "Good girl," Arthur said. He patted my cheek. "Go to bed now. The medicine will kick in soon." I walked up the stairs, my legs feeling heavy, not from drugs, but from the sheer weight of the hatred I was carrying. I went into the master bathroom, locked the door, and spit the dissolving blue paste into the toilet. I flushed it away, watching the water swirl. Then, I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were clear. My mind was sharp. Inner monologue. They think I am asleep. They think I am fading away. Let them think it. Let them get comfortable. Because when the time comes, I will not just wake up. I will rise like a nightmare they cannot wake up from. I turned off the light and crept back to the bedroom door, leaving it cracked open just an inch. I sat on the floor in the dark, hugging my knees, and waited for the show to begin on my phone's screen. The digital clock on the bedside table read 2 a.m. The house was submerged in a silence so profound it felt like the bottom of the ocean. I was not asleep. I was sitting on the floor of my walk-in closet, the door locked, huddled in the corner between my hanging silk dresses and the shoe rack. The only light came from the screen of my phone, casting a ghostly blue pallor over my hands. I was watching my life disintegrate in real time. On the small screen, the live feed from the kitchen camera was crisp. The night vision mode turned the room into a landscape of greens and grays. But the picture was sharp enough to see the sweat on my husband's forehead. Arthur and Chloe were in the kitchen. They had stumbled in 10 minutes ago, laughing like teenagers drunk on cheap wine. Arthur had a bottle of my father's vintage Bordeaux in one hand, a bottle I had been saving for our 20th anniversary. He drank straight from the neck, red wine spilling down his chin, staining his white dress shirt. Chloe was perched on the kitchen island. My island, the same marble slab where I had kneaded dough for hours, where I had chopped vegetables with love, where I had sat and cried over a plate of rejected fish just days ago. She was kicking her legs, her heels banging against the cabinetry. leaving scuff marks on the pristine white wood. I watched, paralyzed, as Arthur moved between her legs. I should have looked away. A normal wife would have thrown the phone across the room or collapsed in sobbing hysterics. But I did not blink. I felt a strange, cold detachment, as if I were a pathologist examining a cadaver. The pain was there, certainly, but it was distant, buried under layers of shock. They did not care who saw them. They did not care that I was sleeping just one floor above. In their minds, I was already a ghost. I was the crazy woman in the attic, drugged into oblivion, incapable of understanding what was happening beneath her own roof. After they finished, Arthur pulled away and leaned against the refrigerator. Panting, Chloe hopped down from the counter and smoothed her skirt, though she looked more annoyed than satisfied. "So," she asked, her voice tinny through the phone speaker, "when is it happening?" "Arthur, I am tired of playing nursemaid to a vegetable. She smells like lavender and desperation." "It is gross," Arthur chuckled, a low, cruel sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Patience, babe, the hearing is set for next month." "Hearing?" I whispered the word into the darkness of my closet. I pressed the volume button on the side of my phone, desperate to catch every syllable. "Dr. Helen has all the paperwork ready," Arthur continued, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "With the documented episodes of memory loss, the paranoia, and the public outbursts I have orchestrated, the judge will have no choice. They will declare her mentally incapacitated." Incapacitated, the legal term hit me like a physical blow. It meant I would lose everything: my right to vote, my right to drive, my right to access my own bank accounts. I would become a ward of the state, or worse, a ward of my husband. "And once I am her legal guardian," Arthur said, walking over to pour more wine into a glass Chloe was holding, "I get full control of the Sinclair Trust. $5 million, Chloe purred, swirling the wine. $5 million, Arthur repeated, plus the house, plus the portfolio. Her father was a genius at making money, but his daughter is too stupid to keep it." He took a sip of wine and looked around the kitchen with a sneer. "God, I hate this place. It feels like a museum, and I hate her. Every time she looks at me with those big, watery, doe eyes, I want to strangle her. She is so weak, so pathetic." He paused, and his face on the screen twisted into something demonic. "Honestly, Chloe, if the stress induces a heart attack, or she accidentally falls down the stairs before the hearing, it would save me a lot of legal fees. The old hag needs to die sooner rather than later, so I can finally live like a king." The silence in my closet was deafening. My heart stopped racing. My hands stopped shaking. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud break. It was the quiet, brittle sound of a final connection being severed. The tether that held me to my morality, to my wedding vows, to the woman I used to be. It was gone. I looked at the man on the screen, the man I had loved for 15 years, the man I had starved myself for, the man I had defended to my friends and family. He did not just want to leave me. He wanted to erase me. He wanted to steal my father's legacy and dance on my grave with his mistress. I closed the app. The screen went black. I sat there in the dark for a long time. I waited for the tears to come, but my eyes were dry. I waited for the panic to return, but my pulse was slow and steady. I stood up. My legs felt strong. I walked to the mirror on the back of the closet door. I turned on the small vanity light. The woman staring back at me was pale and thin, Her collarbones protruded sharply from her skin. Her eyes were sunken, but behind those eyes, there was a fire that had not been there yesterday. It was a cold, blue flame. Arthur wanted a crazy wife? Fine, I would give him a crazy wife. He wanted me to be incapacitated? I would show him exactly what I was capable of. I was not going to divorce him. Divorce was too easy. Divorce meant a settlement. It meant he walked away with half. It meant he survived. Sao Jing Ha Ling. Due cancelletto e maggiore di no. I reached out and touched my reflection. You are not Ivy Sinclair. The victim, I whispered. You are the daughter of Thomas Sinclair, the man who crushed his competition without mercy. It is time to remember whose blood runs in your veins. Arthur wanted the money. He wanted the house. He wanted the life of a king. I would make sure the only thing he left this marriage with was the suit on his back and a prison number. I turned off the light and walked back into the bedroom. I climbed into bed, pulling the duvet up to my chin. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I began to plan. Tomorrow, the real performance would begin, and it would be the performance of a lifetime. The transformation was complete. In the span of a week, I had ceased to be Ivy Sinclair, the elegant hostess of Greenwich, and had become a shuffling, trembling ghost in my own home. I stopped wearing makeup. I allowed my hair to become greasy and unkempt. I wore mismatched socks and sweaters that were slightly too large, creating the visual language of a woman who had given up. Every morning, I woke up and put on my mask. It was a mask of confusion and frailty. I would walk into the kitchen and stare blankly at the toaster, waiting for Chloe to sigh loudly and push me aside. I would ask Arthur the same question 3 times in a row, watching his eyes glaze over with a mixture of annoyance and triumphant pity. It was a performance that required every ounce of my strength. To be treated like a child by the woman sleeping with my husband was a humiliation that burned like acid in my throat. But I swallowed it. I swallowed it all, along with the fake pills and the cold tea. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, the humiliation reached its peak. I was sitting in the living room, attempting to knit, a hobby Arthur knew I had abandoned years ago. I made sure my hands shook violently, the needles clicking together in a chaotic rhythm. Chloe walked in, carrying a tray of lunch. She did not ask if I was hungry. She simply placed the tray on the table with a clatter. "Eat," she commanded, not looking at me. I looked at the soup. It was tomato, but it was cold. A film had formed over the surface. "Chloe," I whispered, my voice wavering. "I think, Sao Yuting Holing, 2 hashes greater than I think I wet myself." It was a lie. Of course, I had spilled a glass of water on the cushion beside me moments before she entered, but I needed to see how far they would go. I needed to see the depth of their cruelty to fuel the fire that kept me warm at night. Chloe stopped. She turned slowly, her face contorting into a sneer of absolute disgust. "Oh my God," she groaned. "Are you serious? You are disgusting. Ivy, absolutely disgusting." She did not offer to help. She did not call for the housekeeper. She simply pulled her phone out and typed a message, likely to Arthur. "Just sit there." She snapped, "Do not move and ruin the rug. I will get some towels, but you are cleaning yourself up. I am not touching you." She walked away, muttering about how much she hated this house. I sat there, staring at the cold soup, and I smiled. It was a small, tight smile. Inner monologue. "That is it, Chloe. Show me who you are. Treat me like a dog, because when I kick you out into the snow, I want to remember this moment. I want to remember that you left me sitting in my own filth, or what you thought was my filth. Without an ounce of mercy, 2 days later, Arthur made his move. He came home early, carrying a leather portfolio under his arm. The air in the house changed the moment he walked in. It became heavy, charged with the static of impending doom. He led me into the library, where a fire was crackling in the hearth. It was a cozy scene, staged perfectly for a betrayal. Chloe was there, too, leaning against the bookshelf, acting as the witness. Arthur guided me to the leather armchair. He knelt beside me, taking my cold hands in his. "Ivy, darling," he said softly, "we need to talk about the future." I blinked rapidly, looking around the room as if I did not recognize it. "The future?" I asked. "Are we going on a trip?" Arthur exchanged a look with Chloe, a look that said, "She is completely gone." "No, Ivy, not a trip. We need to talk about your safety. Dr. Helen and I, Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling, Tuhash is greater than we think. It is time for me to take over the burden of the finances. You are struggling. My love, you are forgetting to pay bills. You are losing track of time. I want to protect you." He opened the portfolio and pulled out a thick stack of documents. "These papers simply say that you trust me to handle the money and the house," he explained, his voice smooth as silk. "It is called a power of attorney. It just means I can sign checks for you so you do not have to worry." I looked at the papers. I saw the legal jargon: full revocation of rights, transfer of asset control, incapacitation clause. It was a death sentence for my freedom. Xiaoyu Jinghao Lin, Tuhash is greater than I do not know. "Arthur," I stammered, pulling my hands away. "My father, Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling, Tuhash is greater than he always said I should never sign anything without a lawyer." Arthur's face hardened instantly. The mask of the loving husband slipped, revealing the predator beneath. "Your father is dead, Ivy," he said, "and you are in no condition to argue. Do you want to go to a state facility? Because if you do not sign these, I cannot afford to keep you here with private care. I will have to send you away. Is that what you want? To be locked up with strangers?" Fear, cold and sharp, was easy to feign because a part of it was real. The threat was genuine. "No, please. Arthur, do not send me away," I cried, letting the tears flow freely. "Then sign the papers," he commanded, thrusting a gold fountain pen into my hand. I took the pen. I brought the tip to the paper. Then I let my hand shake. I shook so hard the pen skidded across the page, leaving a jagged line of black ink. I dropped the pen, sobbing. I wailed. "I cannot write my name. My hands will not listen to me." Arthur let out a growl of frustration. He picked up the pen and jammed it back into my fingers. "Focus. Ivy, just sign your damn name." I looked up at him, my eyes swimming with tears. I saw the greed in his eyes. He was so close to the $5 million he could taste it. "Arthur," I sniffled, wiping my nose on my sleeve. "I will sign. I promise. But Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling, Tuhash is greater than. I am so scared." "I know," he said, softening his tone slightly. "Just sign, and the fear will go away." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I mean, Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling, Tuhash is greater than. I feel like I am disappearing before I give you everything. Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling, Tuhash is greater than before I become just a burden. Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling, Tuhash is greater than. Can I have one last thing?" "Arthur C. Hill, looking at his watch. What is it? Ivy, our 20th wedding anniversary is next week. I whispered. I want a party. A party? Chloe scoffed from the corner. You can barely hold a spoon. And you want a party? I ignored her. I kept my eyes locked on Arthur. Please. Arthur, I want to wear my beautiful dress one last time. I want to see our friends. I want to feel like a wife again. Just for one night. If you give me that, Saoyutsing Ha Ling. 2# is greater than I will sign the papers the next morning. I promise. I will give you everything. Arthur looked at me. Calculating, he looked at the papers, then at me. I could see the wheels turning in his head. A party would be the perfect cover. He could parade me in front of his investors, show them how sick I was, and garner their sympathy. He could play the role of the devoted, suffering husband one last time before taking control of my fortune. It would solidify his narrative. Fine, Arthur said, a smile spreading across his face. We will have a party, a big one. We will invite everyone, the partners, the lawyers, the neighbors. A grand farewell to your Saoyutsing Haling. 2# is greater than social life. Thank you, I whispered, leaning my head back against the chair. Thank you. Arthur, inner monologue. Yes. Invite them all. Invite the partners. Invite the lawyers. Invite the world, because I need an audience for your execution. The next day, Arthur was energized. He began making calls, hiring caterers, and sending out invitations. He was in such a good mood that he barely noticed when I said I needed to go to the pharmacy for my female products. The one errand he was too squeamish to supervise. I drove the car for the first time in weeks. I kept to the back roads, my hands gripping the steering wheel with a strength that would have terrified Arthur. I did not go to the pharmacy. I drove to a small, nondescript office building in the neighboring town of Westport. I walked up the stairs to the second floor and knocked on a door with a frosted glass pane that read, Sterling and Associates, Attorneys at Law. Mr. Sterling was my father's lawyer. He was 70 years old, a man of few words and even fewer smiles. Arthur thought he had retired to Florida years ago. Arthur was wrong. I sat in his office, the blinds drawn. I did not shake. I did not stutter. Ivy, Mr. Sterling said, looking at me over his spectacles. You look, Saoyutsing Hao Ling. 2# is greater than determined. I need you to prepare a document. Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice steady and cold as steel. He opened his notebook. Saoyutsing Hao Ling, due cancelletto, e maggiore di tell me. I need the original copy of the prenuptial agreement. Specifically, the clause regarding infidelity and moral turpitude. And I need you to be at my house on Saturday night. Mr. Sterling paused. He looked at me, analyzing the situation with the sharp mind of a man who had buried many secrets from my family. Is Arthur contesting the trust? He asked. He is trying to steal it. I replied. He thinks I am incapacitated. He thinks I am dying. I reached into my bag and pulled out a flash drive. It contained the video files from the kitchen. The poison, the affair, the confession. I want you to see this, I said, placing the drive on his desk. And then I want you to tell me exactly how we destroy him. Not just financially. Mr. Sterling, I want him to have nothing left but the air in his lungs. Mr. Sterling picked up the drive. For the first time in 20 years, I saw him smile. It was a terrifying smile. Your father would be proud. Ivy, he said. I left his office an hour later. The wind was biting, but I did not feel the cold. I felt alive. I drove back to the house, slipping back into my role before I even opened the front door. I hunched my shoulders. I dulled my eyes. I walked into the kitchen where Chloe was berating the florist on the phone. "Did you get your tampons?" She snapped at me, not bothering to cover the mouthpiece. I nodded, holding up a pharmacy bag I had kept in the trunk for months. "Good," she said. "Now go upstairs. We have guests coming in 2 days. And you look like a witch. Try to do something with your face." I walked up the stairs, clutching the banister, 小雨景号令. 2 hash is greater than 2 days. Just 2 more days of the shakes. 2 more days of the insults. 2 more days of the poison. I went into my bedroom and looked at the dress hanging on the wardrobe door. It was a silver gown, shimmering like moonlight. It was beautiful. It was sharp. It looked like armor. Arthur thought this party was his coronation. He thought he was about to become the king of the castle. He had no idea that he was throwing a feast for the wolves. And I was the pack leader. Inner monologue. Eat, drink, and be merry. Arthur, for tomorrow, you die. The driveway of our estate looked less like a home and more like a showroom for luxury automobiles. A long line of black sedans and silver sports cars snaked its way from the iron gates to the front portico. The house itself was ablaze with light. Every chandelier was lit, casting a golden glow through the windows that spilled onto the snow-covered lawn. It was a scene of perfect, manufactured happiness. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, roasted duck, and the underlying metallic tang of greed. 100 guests filled the ballroom and the grand foyer. These were the vultures of Greenwich society, Arthur's business partners. Men with firm handshakes and shifting eyes stood in circles discussing market volatility. Their wives, draped in silk and diamonds, whispered behind champagne flutes, their eyes darting around the room, hungry for gossip. I knew exactly what they were saying. They were talking about poor Arthur Sinclair. They were saying how tragic it was that his wife had lost her mind so young. They were praising him for his loyalty, for keeping her at home instead of sending her to a facility. Upstairs, in the master bedroom, I stood before the full-length mirror. The woman staring back at me was a stranger to the broken creature of the last few weeks. I had spent 3 hours on my appearance. My hair, washed and blown out, cascaded in soft, dark waves over my shoulders. My skin, scrubbed clean of the grease and gray pallor of neglect, glowed with a layer of foundation and a touch of blush. My lips were painted a deep blood red. I stepped into the dress. It was a floor-length gown of liquid silver that clung to my body like a second skin. It was backless, revealing the sharp definition of my spine, and cut low in the front, daring anyone to look away. I put on my diamond earrings, the ones my father had given me for my 21st birthday. They felt heavy and cold, like droplets of ice against my neck. Inner monologue. You look like a weapon. Ivy. Good. Tonight is not a party. It is a slaughter. You are not walking down those stairs to celebrate a marriage. You are walking down to bury one. Do not tremble. Do not hesitate. Remember the taste of the poison. Remember the sound of them laughing in your kitchen. Let that hate be the steel in your spine. I opened the bedroom door and walked to the top of the grand staircase. Below me, the murmur of the crowd was a dull roar. A string quartet was playing a melodic version of a waltz in the corner. Chloe was standing near the bottom of the stairs, holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres. playing the role of the helpful assistant. She wore a red dress that was too short and too tight, a desperate cry for attention amidst the elegance of the room. Arthur was in the center of the foyer, holding court. He looked dashing in his tuxedo, his face flushed with the intoxication of imminent victory. He was laughing at a joke made by one of his investors, his head thrown back in a display of carefree charm. Then the music stopped. The violinist had seen me first. His bow hovered over the strings, his eyes wide, one by one. The heads turned, the laughter died, the whispers ceased. A silence, heavy and suffocating, descended upon the room. I took the first step. My heels clicked against the wood, a sharp, rhythmic sound that echoed in the quiet hall. I descended slowly, one hand gliding down the banister, my chin held high. I locked eyes with Arthur. His smile faltered. His glass of scotch froze halfway to his mouth. Confusion, then panic, flickered across his face. He had expected a shuffling, confused invalid in a bathrobe. He had expected a prop for his tragedy. Instead, he was looking at the mistress of the house in all her glory. I reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd parted for me, their expressions a mixture of shock and awe. Arthur recovered quickly. He was a salesman. After all, he set his glass down and rushed to my side, grabbing my elbow with a grip that was painful in its intensity. "Ivy," he hissed through his teeth, smiling for the audience while digging his fingers into my flesh. "What are you doing? You are supposed to be resting. You look Sao Jing Halin. 2# is greater than feverish." I pulled my arm away from him with a sharp jerk. "I feel wonderful, Arthur," I said, my voice clear and projecting to the back of the room. I would not miss our 20th anniversary for the world. I turned to the guests, spreading my arms in a gesture of welcome. "Thank you all for coming. It warms my heart to see so many friends here to celebrate with us." A ripple of applause broke out, uncertain at first, then growing louder. Arthur had no choice but to clap along, his eyes darting to Chloe, who looked as if she had swallowed a lemon. "Dinner is served," I announced. We moved into the dining hall. The long mahogany table was set for 20 of the most important guests, while others took their places at round tables set up in the adjoining atrium. Arthur sat at the head of the table. I sat opposite him, miles of white linen and crystal between us. The servers brought out the first course. Arthur leaned forward, his eyes drilling into me. "You are playing a dangerous game, Ivy," he whispered, low enough that only I could hear. "The lawyer is here with the papers. As soon as dessert is served, we go to the study and you sign. Do not think this little dress-up game changes anything. You are still sick, and tomorrow you will be gone." I picked up my wine glass and toasted him silently. The main course arrived. The waiters placed the covered silver platters in front of each guest. I stood up. I picked up a spoon and tapped it against my glass. The sharp ringing sound cut through the conversation. "If I may," I said. Arthur looked ready to lunge across the table to stop me, but the eyes of the investors kept him pinned to his chair. "Before we eat, I want to say a few words about this meal," I began, my hand resting on the silver dome of my own plate. Arthur has always been very particular about food. As many of you know, he has a refined palate. Recently, he has been very concerned about my cooking. He has told me, and many of you, that I have lost my touch, that my mind is failing, that I can no longer tell the difference between fresh food and Sao Jing Haoling. 2# is greater than garbage. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. I saw Linda Gable, the HOA president, shift uncomfortably in her seat. I saw Dr. Helen staring at her napkin. So, tonight, I wanted to prove him wrong. I insisted on preparing the menu myself. This is a recreation of a very special meal. The meal that started this entire journey. I signaled to the head waiter, "Please, lift the covers." The waiters moved in unison. 20 silver domes were lifted. Underneath, steaming gently, sat a perfectly pan-seared fillet of Atlantic cod, accompanied by golden roasted potatoes. The aroma of thyme and butter filled the room. It smelled delicious. However, Arthur stared at his plate as if it were a coiled snake. He went pale. He remembered. This was the meal he had thrown at the wall. This was the meal he had called pig slop. I sat back down. "Please, Arthur," I said, my voice sweet as honey. "Taste it. Tell everyone if it is up to your standards." Arthur looked around the table. The investors were watching him, waiting. He picked up his fork with a trembling hand. He cut a small piece of fish and put it in his mouth. He swallowed hard. "It is howling. Gâteau. Delicious. Ivy." He choked out. "Excellent." I smiled. "I am so glad, because I have one more surprise." I pulled a small remote control from my clutch. We have had 20 years together. Arthur, 20 years of memories. I thought it would be fitting to share a video tribute with our guests. A look behind the curtain of the Sinclair marriage. Arthur relaxed visibly. He thought it was a montage of old photos. He thought I was trying to win him back with nostalgia. He leaned back in his chair, taking a large gulp of wine. "Go ahead, darling," he said, regaining his confidence. "Show them." I pointed the remote at the massive projection screen that had been set up at the far end of the hall. "Enjoy," I whispered. I pressed play. The screen flickered to life. Soft, romantic piano music began to play. A generic track I had downloaded from the internet. The words, "The Sinclair Love Story," appeared in elegant script. Then, the image cut to the kitchen. It was grainy night vision footage, but the timestamp in the corner was clearly visible. 3 days ago, the room went silent. On the screen, Arthur stood by the stove. He was not cooking. He was holding a small plastic container. He looked over his shoulder, checking the door, then turned back to the pot of soup simmering on the burner. He opened the container and dumped a handful of writhing white maggots into the soup. A collective gasp swept through the room. Someone dropped a fork. It clattered loudly against a china plate. On screen, Arthur stirred the maggots into the broth, laughing to himself. The scene cut. Now it was Arthur standing at the island, crushing blue pills into a fine powder. He sprinkled the powder into a teapot. Audio from the screen. "This will knock the bitch out for 12 hours. She will not remember her own name by morning." In the dining hall, Arthur leaped to his feet. His chair crashed backward onto the floor. "Turn it off," he screamed, his face turning a violent shade of purple. "Turn it off now." He scrambled toward the projector, knocking over a waiter. I did not move. I did not turn it off. The scene cut again. This time, it was Arthur and Chloe. They were on the kitchen table. The image was graphic, explicit, unmistakable. Audio from the screen. "I hate her. Every time she looks at me with those big, watery eyes, I want to strangle her. She is so weak. The old hag needs to die sooner rather than later so I can finally live like a king." The video froze on a close-up of Arthur's face, twisted and a sneer of pure malice. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Every eye in the room turned to Arthur. The investors looked horrified. The wives looked sick. Chloe, who had been standing near the kitchen door, turned white as a sheet and backed away, bumping into a tray of glasses that shattered around her feet. Arthur stood in the middle of the room, panting heavily. He looked at the screen, then at the guests, and finally at me. His eyes were wild. He looked like a trapped animal. You, Sao Yu Ding Haling, too, he sputtered, pointing a shaking finger at me. You doctored this. This is fake. It is deep fake technology. She is crazy. I told you she was crazy. He looked at Dr. Helen for support. Tell them, Helen, tell them she is delusional. Dr. Helen did not stand up. She shrank into her chair, covering her face with her hand, clearly realizing that her medical license was burning to ash along with Arthur's reputation. I stood up slowly. I picked up my wine glass and walked around the table until I was standing just a few feet from Arthur. I looked him in the eye. I saw the fear there, the utter, consuming terror of a man who realizes his mask has been ripped off in front of the world. The fish is not rotten, Arthur, I said, my voice calm and cold, carrying to every corner of the silent room. I took a sip of wine and let the liquid linger on my tongue. The potatoes are not rotten. My mind is not rotten. I leaned in closer, so close I could smell the sweat of his fear. Only your character is rotten. You are a thief. You are a liar. And you are a failure. Arthur's face twisted. The humiliation was too much. His narcissism could not handle the weight of the exposure. He roared, a sound of pure primal rage, and lunged at me. His hands reached for my throat. I did not flinch. I did not step back, because I saw the movement in the shadows of the hallway. 2 uniformed police officers stepped into the light. Behind them was Mr. Sterling, my father's lawyer, holding a thick file of evidence. Arthur halted mid-lunge as a strong hand grabbed his shoulder and spun him around. Arthur Sinclair, the officer said, snapping handcuffs onto his wrists. You are under arrest for attempted poisoning, a fraud, and conspiracy to commit grand larceny. The room erupted into chaos. Cameras flashed. People shouted. I stood in the center of the storm, the silver dress shimmering under the lights. I watched as they dragged my husband away. He was screaming, blaming me, blaming the world, blaming everyone but himself. I looked over at Chloe. She was trying to sneak out the side door. Stop her, I said to the second officer. She is an accomplice. Chloe froze. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. Ivy, please. She whimpered. I was just doing what he told me. I looked at her with zero emotion. Enjoy the food in prison. Chloe, I said, I hear it is terrible for the complexion. As they dragged them both out into the cold night, I turned back to the guests. They were staring at me with a mixture of fear and respect. I raised my glass. Please. Everyone, I said, a small, genuine smile touching my lips for the first time in years. Eat your dinner before it gets cold. It would be a shame to waste fresh cod. I sat back down at the head of the table. I was alone. The chair opposite me was empty. And for the first time in my life, the emptiness did not feel like loneliness. It felt like victory. Inner monologue. Look at them. Ivy, look at the fear in their eyes. They will never pity you again. They will never whisper that you are weak. You burned your life to the ground tonight. But look at the beautiful view from the ashes. The heavy oak doors slammed shut, sealing the cold night air and the wailing sirens outside. The ballroom was silent again, save for the nervous clinking of silverware as guests pretended to eat. Or perhaps they were just afraid to stop moving. The air, previously thick with anticipation, now hung heavy with the stench of scandal. It was a unique smell, a mix of expensive cologne and fear. I stood at the head of the table, my hands resting on the white tablecloth. My pulse was slowing down, the adrenaline that had carried me through the execution finally ebbing away, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. Look at them, the elite of Greenwich. 10 minutes ago, they were ready to toast to my insanity. Now they cannot even look me in the eye. They are terrified. They are wondering if I have cameras in their kitchens. 2. They are wondering if I know their secrets. Please, I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs. Do not let the arrest ruin your appetites. Arthur would hate for good food to go to waste. No one ate. One by one, napkins were placed on the table. Chairs scraped against the floor. The exodus began. It was not the slow, polite departure of a dinner party winding down. It was a flee. People grabbed their coats and purses, avoiding my gaze, muttering hasty excuses about babysitters and early mornings. Linda Gable, the president of the Homeowners Association, was the only one who dared to approach me. She walked up to the head of the table, clutching her pearls as if they could protect her from the fallout. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a feigned innocence that made my stomach turn. Ivy, she breathed, reaching out a hand, but stopping short of touching me. I had no idea. Truly, when Arthur told us you were unwell, Sao Ting Hao Ling, 2# is greater than, we just wanted to support him. We had no idea he was. Sao Ting Hao Ling, 2# is greater than capable of such things. I looked at her hand, manicured and trembling, then up to her eyes. I remembered the way she had sped up her car when I waved at her. I remembered the pitying looks at the club. You did not know. Linda? I asked, my voice soft but laced with venom. Or did you just prefer his version of the story? It was much more entertaining, was it not? The tragic decline of the Sinclair heiress. It gave you something to talk about over tennis. Linda flinched as if I had slapped her. Ivy, that is not fair. She stammered. We are your friends. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. I have no friends in this room. Linda, I have an audience, and the show is over. Please leave my house. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She turned and hurried toward the door, her heels clicking a frantic rhythm on the marble. As the room emptied, I spotted a figure trying to slip out through the service entrance near the kitchen. It was Dr. Helen. She had pulled her coat collar up high, trying to make herself invisible. Dr. Helen, I called out. She froze, her shoulders hunched. Slowly, she turned around. The arrogance she had displayed in her office, the clinical detachment she had used to diagnose me with a disease I did not have, was gone. In its place was the sheer terror of self-preservation. Sao Ting Hao Ling, 2# is greater than I was just leaving. Mrs. Sinclair, she said, her voice cracking. I walked toward her. I did not hurry. I moved with the slow, deliberate pace of a predator who knows the prey has nowhere to run. You forgot your bag, I said, pointing to the leather tote she had left on her chair. And you forgot your ethics. I did not know about the poison. Evie, she pleaded, backing up until she hit the wall. I swear, Arthur just told me you were confused. He showed me the data, I made a diagnosis based on what he told me. You made a diagnosis based on the bribe he paid you. I corrected her. I stopped inches from her face. My lawyer has the bank records. Ellen, we know about the $50,000 deposit into your offshore account last month. We know everything. Tears welled up in her eyes behind her rimless glasses. Please, she whispered. My license, my practice, is gone. I finished for her. By tomorrow morning, the medical board will have a copy of that video. You will never practice medicine again. You will never sign another prescription. You will be lucky if you do not join Arthur in a cell. Now, get out. She scrambled for the door, sobbing, and disappeared into the night. The room was finally empty of guests. The only people left were the catering staff, who were quietly clearing the plates of uneaten food, and Mr. Sterling, who sat calmly at the table, sipping a glass of wine. He looked at me and nodded. Well done, Ivy, he said. I pulled out the chair opposite him, Arthur's chair, and sat down. My legs suddenly felt like lead. Is it done? I asked. Mr. Sterling reached into his briefcase and pulled out a file. I have already contacted the banks. All joint accounts are frozen. Arthur's personal credit cards have been canceled. The police have the video evidence, the pill samples, and the testimony from the nanny cam with the attempted poisoning charge. Bail will be set in the millions. He does not have millions. Not anymore. What about the house? I asked, looking around the grand hall that felt so cold and empty. The house is in your name, held by the trust. Sterling replied, the prenuptial agreement is ironclad. The infidelity clause alone was enough to void his claim to any assets. But the attempted murder, Saoitsinghao Ling, 2# is greater than well. That seals it. He leaves this marriage with nothing. In fact, he owes the estate for the funds he embezzled from the household accounts over the last 5 years. We will sue him for every penny, even if he has to work in the prison laundry for the rest of his life to pay it back. I nodded, staring at the empty chair. I thought I would feel happy. I thought I would feel a rush of triumph, but all I felt was a deep, aching exhaustion. And Chloe? I asked. Charged as an accessory, Sterling said. She will likely turn state's witness to save herself, which will only bury Arthur deeper. They will tear each other apart in court. You will not even have to testify if you do not want to. The video speaks for itself. I closed my eyes. I could still hear Arthur's voice screaming as they dragged him away. You are crazy. I told you she was crazy. He really believed it. He believed his own lie so deeply that even when the truth was projected on a 20-foot screen, he could not accept it. He thought I was weak. He thought I was stupid. He never saw me. In 15 years of marriage, he never looked at me and saw a person. He only saw a bank account with a pulse. Go home, Mr. Sterling, I said quietly. It is late. You should rest. Ivy, he said, standing up and buttoning his coat. The press will be at the gates in the morning. The story is already leaking. I saw a tweet from one of your guests before they even left the driveway. Dinner party from hell in Greenwich. Husband arrested for poisoning wife. You are trending. Ivy, I let out a bitter laugh. Let them talk, I said. They have been talking about me for weeks. At least now they are telling the truth. Sterling left. The caterers finished packing up and departed, leaving the kitchen spotless, erasing the physical traces of the night. I walked through the silent house. I turned off the lights in the ballroom. I turned off the lights in the foyer. I walked up the stairs in the dark. the silver dress rustling softly around my legs. I went into the master bedroom. It smelled of Arthur. His cologne still lingered on the pillows. His watch was still on the nightstand. I picked up the watch. It was a Rolex, a gift I had bought him for Christmas 5 years ago. I looked at it for a moment, watching the second hand tick away the time. Then, I walked to the window and opened it. The cold winter air rushed in, biting my skin. I looked out at the snow-covered lawn, illuminated by the moonlight. I threw the watch. It disappeared into a snowbank, swallowed by the white silence. I stripped off the silver dress and let it fall to the floor. I did not hang it up. I kicked it into the corner. I scrubbed the red lipstick off my face until my skin was raw. I was alone. The silence was absolute, but for the first time in months, I was not afraid of the dark. The monster was not under the bed. The monster was in a cage, where he belonged. But as I climbed into the massive, empty bed, a single tear rolled down my cheek. Not for Arthur, not for the marriage, but for the 20 years of trust that had been murdered tonight. I stared at the ceiling, waiting for the dawn, knowing that tomorrow the world would judge me. But their judgment did not matter anymore. I had judged myself, and I had survived. The morning sun did not bring warmth. It brought a harsh, blinding light that exposed every dust mote dancing in the stagnant air of the mansion. I woke up at 7 o'clock, my body aching as if I had run a marathon. The adrenaline that had fueled my performance the night before had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, rattling emptiness. I walked downstairs. The house was impeccably clean, thanks to the caterers, but it felt sterile. It felt like a crime scene that had been scrubbed of blood, but still held the memory of violence. Outside the iron gates, I could see the news vans. They were like vultures, waiting for a carcass. Their satellite dishes pointed at my front door. I closed the heavy velvet drapes, shutting out the world. I went to the kitchen, the scene of the crime. The copper pots hung gleaming from the rack. The marble island was cold to the touch. I made a pot of coffee, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sudden, overwhelming realization of my solitude. For 15 years, this kitchen had been a battleground, a stage, and a prison. Now, it was just a room. The phone rang. It was Mr. Sterling. Good morning. Ivy. His voice was grave. I have an update from the district attorney. Tell me, I said, leaning against the counter, staring at the spot where Arthur used to crush my pills. The arraignment was an hour ago. The judge denied bail for Arthur. The flight risk is too high, and the video evidence of the poisoning is Hao Ling, Tuo damning. He is being held at the County Correctional Center. And the assets? I asked, my voice flat, frozen. We have invoked the infidelity clause of the prenuptial agreement immediately. Arthur has been served with the divorce papers in his cell. He is contesting, of course, screaming that he was entrapped, but he has no ground to stand on. He leaves with nothing. Ivy, the trust, the house, the portfolio. It is all secure. Thank you, Mr. Sterling. What about the girl, Chloe? She is cooperating, Sterling said with a hint of disgust. She is singing like a bird to cut a deal. She claims Arthur forced her. She says she was afraid of him. It does not matter. Her testimony ensures he will go away for a long time. 10 years. Minimum. Attempted murder is not taken lightly in Connecticut. I hung up the phone. 10 years. It sounded like a lifetime. Yet it was 5 years less than the time I had wasted on him. I put the coffee cup down. I could not drink it. It tasted like ash. I walked up the stairs, my bare feet silent on the plush carpet. I had one final task to complete, a physical exorcism. I went into the guest bedroom, Chloe's room. It smelled of her cheap vanilla perfume. Her clothes were scattered on the floor, a chaotic mess of fast fashion and poor taste. I grabbed a black, heavy-duty trash bag from the closet. I did not fold anything. I swept her dresses, her shoes, her makeup, and her tawdry jewelry into the bag. I stripped the sheets from the bed where she had slept, the sheets she had soiled with her presence, and stuffed them into. I dragged the bag down the hall to the balcony that overlooked the driveway. I opened the French doors. The wind whipped my hair across my face. Below, the snow was pristine white. I heaved the bag over the railing. It landed with a dull thud in a snowbank, looking like a dead body wrapped in plastic. Inner monologue. You wanted to live in a mansion. Chloe, you wanted my life? You can have the garbage. That is all that is left of your ambition. Then, I went to the master bedroom. Arthur's closet was a temple to his vanity. Rows of Italian suits, color-coordinated shirts, and silk ties. I ran my hand over the fabric of a gray cashmere jacket. I remembered the day I bought it for him. He had smiled, that charming, lying smile, and told me I was the best wife in the world. I felt a sob build in my chest, a hot, expanding pressure that threatened to crack my ribs. I did not pack his clothes. I did not throw them out. I simply closed the door and locked it. I took the key and walked to the bathroom. I dropped the key into the toilet and flushed. I sank to the floor, leaning my back against the bathtub. The victory was supposed to taste sweet. That is what they tell you in books. They tell you that revenge is a dish best served cold. And once you serve it, you are free. But they do not tell you about the silence that follows. I was free. Yes, but I was also 42 years old, alone in a 10,000 square foot house, with a womb that would never carry a child, and a heart that had been ground into dust by the person who was supposed to protect it. I pulled my knees to my chest and wrapped my arms around them. I did not cry for Arthur. I did not cry for the man who tried to kill me. I cried for the Ivy who had cooked that fish. I cried for the woman who had tried so hard, who had loved so blindly, who had believed that if she just added enough butter, enough salt, enough love, she could fix a broken man. I cried for the 15 years that were gone, 15 years of gaslighting, 15 years of thinking I was not enough. I sat there on the cold tile floor until the sun moved across the sky and the shadows lengthened again. The house creaked around me, settling into its new reality. The war was over. The enemy was vanquished. But as I looked around the empty bathroom, I realized the hardest part was not fighting the monster. The hardest part was figuring out who I was now that the monster was gone. It had been 30 days since the night of the silver dress and the shattered illusions. The house was quiet now. The media vans had finally packed up and left, chasing the next tragedy in the next wealthy zip code. The silence that filled the hallways was no longer heavy or suffocating. It felt spacious. It felt like a blank canvas waiting for paint. I stood in the center of the kitchen. The nanny cam was gone. The copper pots were where I wanted them to be. The windows were thrown open, letting in the crisp air of early spring, carrying the scent of thawing earth and new beginnings. On the marble island, sitting on a simple white plate, was a baked potato. It was not a side dish. It was the main event. I had roasted it for an hour until the skin was crisp and golden brown. I had sliced it open. watching the steam rise in a fragrant cloud. And then I had committed a culinary sin that would have given Arthur a stroke. I had buried the potato under a mountain of toppings, a thick slab of salted butter that was already melting into yellow rivers, a generous dollop of full-fat sour cream, a handful of sharp cheddar cheese, and crispy bits of bacon I had fried in their own grease. It was caloric suicide. It was greasy. It was heavy. It was perfect. I picked up the legal correspondence that Mr. Sterling had messaged over that morning. I read the words without a tremor in my hands. Arthur had taken a plea deal to avoid a highly publicized trial that would expose even more of his humiliating secrets. He had pleaded guilty to assault and reckless endangerment. He would serve 15 years in a state penitentiary, but the prison sentence was not the true punishment for a man like Arthur. The letter detailed the civil suits. His former business partners had sued him for fraud. They had taken his car, his boat, and even his collection of vintage watches. He was bankrupt. He was a pauper. The king was not just dethroned. He was naked. I set the tablet down and looked at the potato. Inner monologue. You won, Ivy. But let us be honest for a moment in this quiet room. You were not just a victim. You were an accomplice to your own misery. You knew who he was. You knew he was weak and greedy when you married him. But you thought your money could fix him. You thought you could buy his loyalty with a trust fund and control his affection with a credit card. You treated him like a pet. And then you were surprised when he bit you. You were both monsters in this marriage. He wanted your money, and you wanted his image. You both got exactly what you deserved. It was a harsh truth, but swallowing it felt necessary. I could not move forward if I kept painting myself as the saint. I had been blind because I wanted to be blind. I had been controlling because I was afraid to be unloved. I picked up my fork. I did not look at the empty chair opposite me. I did not think about Chloe, who was currently awaiting sentencing in a county jail, likely trading her fake designer bags for cigarettes. I thought about myself, Ivy Sinclair, not the heiress, not the victim, just a woman who was hungry. I cut a large piece of the potato, making sure to get a bit of everything. The cheese, the bacon, the cool sour cream, and the hot, fluffy starch. I lifted the fork to my mouth. For years, I had eaten for Arthur. I had eaten to be thin. I had eaten to be pretty. I had eaten to be the perfect ornament on his arm. Today, I ate for me. I took the bite. The flavors exploded in my mouth. It was salty and rich and comforting. It did not taste like guilt. It did not taste like fear. And it certainly did not taste like pig slop. It tasted like freedom. I chewed slowly, savoring every second of it. A small smile touched my lips, genuine and warm. I was alone in a big, empty house with scars on my heart that would never fully heal. But the sun was shining through the window. The food was warm, and for the first time in my life, I was full.